The moment I stepped out of the DMV building that afternoon, my heart was pounding like a drum in a storm. I had just finished my driving test, and the result, pass or fail, was a looming shadow I couldn't shake. Rain-soaked streets stretched before me, reflecting the glaring afternoon sun, and I felt like the world was holding its breath along with me. I had dreamed of this day for months, ever since I had scraped together the courage to get my learner's permit, and now the final test had passed, leaving me trembling in ways I hadn't expected. If you believe in kindness and second chances, please hit like, comment, share, and subscribe to Touch of Kindness, because this story will remind you why a simple act of human care can change a life. I remember my instructor, Mr. Caelan Ward, clearly, though in many ways I barely knew him. He was older, in his late 40s, with streaks of silver through his thick black hair and a quiet patience that most people mistook for indifference. He had taught me to drive over the past 3 months, and his methods were strict but fair. He never shouted or embarrassed me the way other instructors sometimes did. Instead, he observed, corrected, and encouraged, his calm voice cutting through my self-doubt like a lifeline. There had been days when I felt like I would never pass, when I fumbled the gears or stalled at the tiniest incline, and every time his steady presence pulled me back from despair. That day, after the test, I sat in the passenger seat of his car, waiting for the results. I could barely keep my hands from shaking. The silence was heavy, filled only with the faint hum of the traffic around us. Then he turned to me, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You did well," he said simply, and my chest exploded with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "You're officially licensed." I could feel tears welling in my eyes, though I fought to hold them back. It wasn't just the license that mattered, it was the months of struggle, of doubt, of trying and failing and trying again. As we drove through the city streets, I realized that the sun was dipping lower, stretching shadows across the road. I mentioned that I had missed the last bus home, and before I could even think about arranging a ride, he offered, "I can take you home, it's on my way." There was no hesitation, no question of inconvenience. He simply said it as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Something about the casual generosity of the offer made my chest tighten. The car smelled faintly of pine air freshener and leather. Outside, the city was bathed in the soft glow of the late afternoon, pedestrians moving lazily along sidewalks, streetlights flickering to life one by one. Mr. Ward didn't say much as we drove. Occasionally he offered a word of advice about driving in the city, about staying calm at red lights, about predicting the actions of other drivers. But mostly, he let the silence stretch comfortably between us. I found myself studying him, the small lines around his eyes, the calmness in his movements, the way his hands gripped the wheel with a quiet confidence. There was something unspoken in his presence, a kind of reassurance that the world wouldn't always overwhelm you if you just had someone steady beside you. We arrived at my small apartment complex just as the sun sank fully below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of amber and rose. I fumbled to grab my bag, still overwhelmed by the whirlwind of emotion. "Thanks for everything," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. He nodded, his expression unreadable for a moment, then softened. "You've earned every bit of this, Alex. Don't ever forget that." I closed the door behind me and leaned against it for a moment, my hands still trembling. My room was modest. Posters of distant places I dreamed of seeing someday, a small desk cluttered with notebooks, and a single lamp casting a warm glow across the room. I sat down trying to calm my racing thoughts. The day had been monumental in ways I hadn't anticipated. Passing the driving test was a milestone, yes, but the trust, the guidance, the unspoken belief Mr. Ward had shown me felt even bigger, almost like a bridge to a version of myself I hadn't fully met yet. That night, sleep didn't come easily. My mind replayed every moment of the test, every correction, every word of encouragement. The weight of independence, finally being able to drive, to navigate life on my own, settled heavily on my shoulders. But along with that weight came a spark, a sense that maybe, just maybe, I was capable of more than I had believed. I thought about my family, my friends, the world outside my apartment walls, and I realized that all those fears, all that hesitation, had been part of a shell I had built around myself, and tonight that shell was beginning to crack. A few hours later, I couldn't sleep any longer. I stepped outside onto the small balcony of my apartment, feeling the cool night air brush against my skin. The city stretched endlessly below, alive with a quiet pulse, 1,000 lives intersecting in ways I would never fully understand. And I thought about Mr. Ward, about his quiet patience, his unexpected kindness, the way he had taken time to guide someone he barely knew. The realization hit me harder than I expected. Acts of kindness weren't just gestures. They were catalysts, moments that could shift the entire trajectory of a life. In that moment, I made a promise to myself. I would carry this forward, this sense of responsibility, this awareness that someone's quiet support could make all the difference. The next day, I began practicing driving alone, but not just the mechanics of it, the confidence, the decision-making, the awareness that I was responsible not just for myself, but for others on the road. And with each drive, I felt myself changing subtly but surely, becoming someone more decisive, more thoughtful, more present. Over the next weeks, I found myself thinking more and more about Mr. Ward, not just as an instructor, but as a symbol of what it meant to guide and to care without expectation. One afternoon, I mustered the courage to call him, just to say thanks again. He answered immediately, a low chuckle in his voice when he heard my voice. "You're driving yet?" he asked. "I hope you haven't scared anyone." I laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in months. We talked for nearly an hour, about driving, about life, about the small challenges that seem insurmountable until someone helps you step through them. That conversation, simple as it was, reinforced something I had started to realize the night after my test. Growth didn't happen in isolation. It happened in moments of connection, in the presence of someone willing to lend guidance and faith. Months passed, and I found myself taking more risks, not reckless ones, but meaningful ones. I started volunteering at a local youth center, helping teenagers with tutoring and guidance, sharing the lessons I had learned about patience, resilience, and the quiet power of encouragement. I could see the same flicker of doubt and fear in their eyes that I had felt before passing my driving test, and I knew that a small gesture, a kind word, or a patient moment could be life-changing. And when I told them the story of my instructor who had quietly changed my life, I could see hope spark in their eyes, the same way it had been sparked in mine. Looking back now, I understand that the night Mr. Ward drove me home wasn't just a simple act of courtesy. It was a pivotal moment in my life. It was the night I truly began to feel like a man, not in the sense of age or authority, but in understanding responsibility, empathy, and the quiet strength that comes from trusting someone and being trusted in return. That night taught me that life isn't always about the big dramatic gestures. It's about the small, consistent acts of care, the moments when someone shows faith in you without asking for anything in return. As I sit here, reflecting on that time, I realize that my transformation didn't happen overnight. It was gradual, stitched together by small moments of guidance, courage, and self-reflection. And yet, the memory of that evening, of the quiet drive through city streets as the sun dipped below the horizon, remains vivid in my mind. A constant reminder of what it feels like to be seen, supported, and given a chance to rise.